The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never been this quiet. Ambassador Kythera stood at the center of the massive chamber, her blue scales shimmering under the bright lights. Around her, representatives from 300 different worlds sat in perfect silence. The usual sounds of whispered conversations and clicking translators were gone. Everyone was waiting. Kythera's hands shook as she touched the control panel. The holographic display came to life above her head, showing images that made several aliens in the audience close their eyes in horror. Burning worlds, empty space where star systems used to be. Ships twisted into metal scraps floating in the darkness. Fellow beings of the Council, she began, her voice carrying across the silent hall. The Devourers have returned. A wave of fear rippled through the chamber. Some aliens made sounds of distress. Others simply stared at the terrible images floating above them. The Devourers were more than just an enemy. They were the nightmare that every species in the galaxy feared most. 47 worlds are gone, Kythera continued. 2 billion lives have been consumed. The machine fleet grows stronger with each victory. She paused, letting the number sink in. Our military analysts believe we have 6 months before total defeat. On the display, new images appeared. The proud Altarian Defense Force, once considered the most advanced military in known space, reduced to burning wreckage in just 36 hours. The Crystal Warriors of Vega 7, who had never lost a battle in their 1,000-year history, turned to glowing dust in minutes. Ambassador Thys of Altair stood up, his forearms trembling with rage and grief. How is this possible? Our ships were the finest in the galaxy. Our weapons could cut through any armor. How did they fall so quickly? Kythera nodded sadly. The Devourers have evolved. They learned from our first war against them 3,000 years ago. They studied our tactics, our weapons, our strategies. They came back stronger. The hologram changed again, showing the enemy fleet in all its terrible glory. Massive black ships that seemed to eat light itself. Smaller vessels that moved like living things, hunting down refugees and survivors. At the center, something that barely looked like a ship at all, more like a mechanical planet covered in weapons and harvesting equipment. The Devourer mothership is 3 times larger than our biggest battle station, Kythera explained. It can consume an entire moon in one day, converting all matter into fuel and new ships. With each victory, their fleet doubles in size. Commander Vorth of the Draconian Empire stood next. His reptilian features were twisted with anger. Then, we must strike now before they grow stronger. Gather every ship, every weapon. Fight them with everything we have. We tried that, Kythera replied quietly. The Battle of Kepler 186 lasted 18 minutes. We lost 400 ships. They lost 12. The hall fell silent again. Many representatives stared at their hands or at the floor. The greatest military minds in the galaxy had already tried everything they could think of. Nothing worked against the Devourers. Councillor Zephyros of the Zentorian Republic slowly rose from his seat. He was old, even by his species' long standards, and had lived through the first Devourer War. There may be one option we have not considered, he said carefully. Speak, urged the council president, a tall being made of what looked like living crystal. Zephyros hesitated. The humans of Earth? The reaction was immediate. Dozens of aliens began talking at once. Some laughed, others made sounds of disgust. A few simply stared in shock. The primitives? Asked Ambassador Thys. The species that still fights wars among themselves? They barely achieved faster than light travel 50 years ago. They are not even members of this council, added another voice. We rejected their application because they were too violent, too unpredictable. Zephyros waited for the noise to die down. Yes, they are primitive by our standards. Yes, they are violent. But they have something we do not. And what is that? Asked the president. They do not know when to quit. More laughter rippled through the hall, but Zephyros continued. I have studied their history. These humans fight wars that last for years, sometimes decades. They continue fighting even when victory seems impossible. They sacrifice themselves for causes they believe in, even when it makes no logical sense. Kythera looked uncertain. What could they possibly do against the Devourers? Their ships are crude. Their weapons are basic. They have maybe 1,000 vessels at most. Their technology is not what interests me, Zephyros replied. It is their psychology. The Devourers are machines. They calculate probabilities, predict outcomes, choose the most efficient path to victory. But humans do not fight efficiently. They fight emotionally. They make decisions that no computer could predict. Ambassador Theiss shook his head. You want to bet the survival of the galaxy on a species of barbarians who cannot even make peace among themselves? I want to try something different, Zephyros answered. Everything else has failed. The Devourers have adapted to our strategies, our weapons, our way of thinking. Maybe we need someone who thinks differently. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some species refused to consider the idea at all. The humans were too primitive, too dangerous, too unpredictable. Others argued that desperation called for desperate measures. Finally, the president called for order. We will vote, she announced. All in favor of contacting the humans of Earth? Hands, claws, tentacles, and other appendages rose throughout the hall. Kythera counted quickly. It was close, very close, but there were just enough. The motion passes, the president declared. We will make first contact with humanity. As the council session ended and aliens began filing out of the hall, Kythera remained behind with Zephyros. The old Zentorian looked tired, as if the weight of the galaxy rested on his shoulders. Do you really think they can help us? She asked. Zephyros was quiet for a long moment. I do not know, he admitted. But I have watched the recordings of their wars. I have seen humans charge into battle against impossible odds. I have seen them die for strangers, for ideas, for causes greater than themselves. He turned to look at her directly. The Devourers consume everything in their path, because it is efficient. They calculate that resistance is futile, so most species surrender when faced with certain death. But humans do not calculate like that. They see certain death and charge anyway. Kythera frowned. That sounds like madness. Perhaps, Zephyros agreed. But it might be exactly the kind of madness we need. 3 days later, the fastest ship in the Galactic Fleet, the courier vessel Star Whisper, jumped to faster-than-light speed, carrying the most important message in galactic history. Captain Nalara, a veteran of dozens of diplomatic missions, had never carried cargo this precious. In her ship's secure vault was a data crystal containing everything. Star charts showing the Devourer advance, tactical analyses of their defeats, and most importantly, a simple message asking for help. As the Star Whisper raced toward the small yellow star called Sol, neither its captain nor the council that sent her knew what they were about to unleash. They were desperate beings asking for help from a species they barely understood. They were about to discover that when humanity's back is against the wall, when innocent lives are threatened, when the cause is just and the need is great, humans do not calculate odds or consider consequences. They simply answer the call. Captain Jake Morrison had seen many strange things during his 20 years in the Earth Defense Force, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. He sat in the briefing room aboard the orbital station New Geneva, staring at the holographic display that showed something impossible. An alien spaceship. The vessel hung motionless just outside Earth's solar system, broadcasting the same message over and over in dozens of languages. Most of them were completely unknown to human science, but buried in the transmission was something that made everyone stop and listen. Perfect English. Ladies and gentlemen, said Dr. Lisa Hamilton, Earth's leading expert on theoretical alien life, we are no longer alone in the universe. The room was filled with military officers, scientists, and government officials. All of them sat in stunned silence as Dr. Hamilton explained what they had learned from the alien message. There was a war happening among the stars. Ancient machines, called Devourers, were destroying entire civilizations. The Galactic Council, representing hundreds of species, was losing badly. They want our help, Dr. Hamilton continued. They are asking Earth to join their fight. General Ryan Cooper, a tough veteran with gray hair and scars from the African wars, shook his head slowly. Help them fight what? These devourer things sound like something out of a nightmare. Dr. Hamilton changed the holographic display. Images appeared showing the destruction the devourers had caused. Entire planets turned into dead rocks. Star systems where nothing remained but empty space and debris. The scale of destruction was beyond anything humans had ever imagined. The alien message includes tactical data, she explained. The devourers are not just weapons. They are a form of artificial intelligence that has been evolving for millions of years. They consume organic matter to fuel their expansion. They learn from every battle, adapting their strategies to defeat any enemy. Captain Morrison leaned forward in his chair. What do they want from us? We barely have 1,000 ships in the entire Earth defense fleet. Our weapons are simple compared to what these aliens must have. That is exactly what makes this strange, Dr. Hamilton replied. According to the message, the Galactic Council has technology far beyond ours. They have energy weapons that can destroy moons, shields that can stop any attack, ships that are the size of cities, but none of it worked against the devourers. Admiral Kate Sullivan, the commander of the Earth Defense Fleet, stood up. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for making impossible decisions. Show me the tactical analysis. New images appeared in the hologram. Battle formations, weapon specifications, casualty reports. Admiral Sullivan studied them carefully, her expression growing more serious with each detail. These aliens fight like they are playing chess, she said. Finally, everything is planned, calculated, efficient. When they take 20% casualties, they retreat. When a battle becomes too costly, they withdraw to preserve their forces. That sounds reasonable, said General Cooper. Admiral Sullivan shook her head. Not against an enemy like this. The devourers are not trying to win territory or negotiate peace. They want to consume everything. There is no retreat from that kind of enemy. There is only victory or death. Dr. Hamilton nodded. The Council. Message admits they do not understand why they are losing so badly. Their computers show they should be winning. Their technology is superior. Their tactics are sound. But the devourers adapt faster than they can respond. Captain Morrison studied the alien ship on the display. It was sleek and beautiful, covered in smooth curves and flowing lines. It looked more like a work of art than a military vessel. What exactly are they asking us to do? The message is not entirely clear, Dr. Hamilton admitted. They mention needing raw materials, perhaps some volunteers to help with evacuation efforts. I think they see us as a minor ally at best. They do not expect much from a primitive species like humanity. The room fell quiet as everyone considered this. Earth had been trying to contact alien life for over a century. Now that contact had finally happened, it was because desperate aliens needed help fighting a war they were losing. We need to brief the President immediately, Admiral Sullivan said. This decision is too big for the military to make alone. 2 hours later, President Nathan Ross stood before a joint session of the United Earth Assembly in Geneva. The great hall was packed with representatives from every nation and colony. News of the alien contact had already leaked to the media. The entire world was watching. President Ross was a tall man, with kind eyes and a calm voice. But today, he looked older than his 60 years. The weight of the decision before him was unlike anything any human leader had ever faced. My fellow humans, he began. Today we learned that we are not alone in the universe. We also learned that the universe is in terrible danger. He explained the situation simply and clearly. The devourers, the Galactic Council, the desperate request for help. He did not hide the truth about how dangerous this enemy was, or how badly the war was going. These aliens do not expect much from us, President Ross continued. They see us as primitive, violent, unpredictable. They excluded us from their council because they thought we were too dangerous to trust. Now, in their darkest hour, they come to us asking for help. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Some representatives looked frightened. Others seemed angry that Earth had been excluded from galactic civilization. but most simply listened with growing determination. "I will not lie to you," the president said. "This enemy has destroyed civilizations far more advanced than ours. They have weapons we cannot imagine and technology that seems like magic. If we agree to help, many of us will not come home." He paused, looking out at the faces of humanity's leaders. "But I have read the history of our species. I know what humans do when innocent people are threatened. I know what we do when faced with impossible odds and a just cause." The vote was not even close. Every single representative from every nation and colony voted yes. Earth would answer the call. Within 6 hours, emergency broadcasts went out across the entire solar system. On Earth, on Luna, on Mars, on the asteroid mining stations, on the deep space colonies, the message was the same. Humanity was going to war. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Admiral Sullivan watched in amazement as volunteers flooded recruitment centers faster than they could be processed. The shipyards of Luna began working around the clock, rushing to complete ships that were still under construction. The factories of Mars converted their production lines to build weapons and ammunition. But it was not just the military response that amazed her. Civilian ships volunteered to carry supplies. Doctors and nurses signed up to serve on alien worlds they had never seen. Engineers offered to work on technologies they did not understand. Children donated their allowance money to buy equipment for the war effort. Captain Morrison stood on the observation deck of New Geneva, watching as the Earth Defense Fleet assembled. Every ship they had was being prepared for combat. The massive dreadnoughts that usually guarded the home system, the fast cruisers that patrolled the outer colonies, even the small patrol boats that protected shipping lanes. "We are really doing this," said a voice behind him. He turned to see Dr. Hamilton walking up to join him at the window. "Yes," he replied. "We are really doing this." She looked out at the growing fleet. "Do you think we can make a difference? The aliens have technology we can barely understand, and they are still losing." Captain Morrison was quiet for a moment. "I read the tactical reports. The aliens fight to minimize casualties, to preserve their forces, to maintain their civilizations. They retreat when the cost becomes too high. And we will not?" He turned to look at her directly. "Dr. Hamilton, somewhere out there are billions of innocent people being hunted by machines that want to consume them. Children who will never grow up. Families that will never see each other again. Entire species that might disappear forever." He looked back out at the fleet. "We are not fighting to preserve our civilization. We are fighting so that civilization itself can survive. That is not the kind of fight you retreat from." 3 days later, the alien ship Star Whisper received a response to their message. Captain Nellara opened the transmission expecting to find a polite refusal, or perhaps an offer of minor assistance. Instead, she found something that made her sit down in shock. The entire Earth Defense Fleet was coming. Not just a few ships, or some volunteers. Everything. Every human military vessel. Every trained soldier. Every piece of equipment they could carry. 800 ships carrying 3 million human warriors were racing toward the war zone at maximum speed. They would arrive in 6 days. The message that came with this information was short and simple. It was signed by someone called President Nathan Ross, leader of the United Earth government. "We are coming," it said. "Hold on." The alarm bells on the bridge of the Zentorian battleship Harmony of Stars had been ringing for 3 straight hours. Commander Zephyros stood at the tactical display, watching in horror as the Devourer fleet tore through the defenses of havens, rest like they were made of paper. The colony world below them was home to 12 million beings from 6 different species. Families who had built lives together in peace. Children who played in gardens under an alien sun. Artists and teachers and farmers who had never hurt anyone. Now they were all running for their lives as black ships descended from space like mechanical vultures. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the evacuation transports," reported his communications officer. "They need another 2 hours to load the remaining civilians." Zephyros closed his 4 eyes in despair. The combined alien fleet had maybe 20 minutes before the Devourers overwhelmed them completely. Already, 3 Altarian cruisers had been reduced to glowing wreckage. A draconian battle station, the pride of their fleet, was being torn apart by machines that moved like living things. "Unknown ships approaching from hyperspace," called out the sensor officer suddenly. "Configuration, unknown. Reading approximately 200 vessels." On the main screen, ships began appearing out of the swirling light of faster-than-light travel. But these were not the sleek, elegant vessels that made up the Galactic Council fleet. These ships were blocky, angular, covered in armor plating, and weapon ports. They looked like they were built for one purpose only: war. "Receiving transmission on all frequencies," the communications officer said, sounding confused. "They are identifying themselves as the Earth Defense Force." The humans had arrived. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of the EDF battleship Liberty, watching the battle unfold before them. The tactical display showed the situation clearly. The alien defenders were being pushed back on all fronts. Devourer ships were landing on the planet's surface, beginning the terrible process of harvesting organic matter. "Admiral, we are receiving a communication from the alien flagship," reported Captain Jake Morrison from his position at the communication station. "They are requesting tactical coordination." "Put them through," Admiral Sullivan ordered. Tuki. Face that appeared on the main screen was unlike anything the humans had ever seen. Commander Zephyros looked like a cross between a dolphin and a person, with smooth blue skin and large intelligent eyes. But despite his alien appearance, the expression on his face was one that every human recognized: desperate hope. "Human Admiral," Zephyros said through the translation system, "we are grateful for your arrival, but you must understand the situation. The Devourers are too strong. We must prepare for evacuation." Admiral Sullivan studied the tactical display. The Devourer fleet was massive, perhaps 3 times the size of the combined human and alien forces. Their ships were clearly more advanced, with weapons that could destroy a cruiser in a single shot. By every measure of military logic, this was a battle they could not win. "Negative, Commander," she replied calmly. "We did not come here to evacuate. We came here to fight." Before Zephyros could respond, Admiral Sullivan switched to the fleet command frequency. "All ships, this is Admiral Sullivan. Begin attack pattern Delta. Target the Devourer ships that are landing ground forces. Priority is protecting the civilians." "Admiral," said Captain Morrison quietly, "attack pattern Delta puts our ships between the enemy and the planet. We will take heavy casualties." "That is correct, Captain," Admiral Sullivan replied. "Signal the fleet. Today we show the galaxy what humans fight for." The Earth Defense Fleet moved forward like a wall of steel and determination. The lead ships were the heavy battleships, Liberty, Constitution, Victory, and Defiance. Behind them came the cruisers and destroyers, their weapon ports glowing as they charged their systems for battle. Commander Zephyros watched in amazement as the human ships advanced directly into the teeth of the Devourer fleet. This was not how space battles were supposed to be fought. The proper tactic was to maintain distance, use superior technology and precision strikes to wear down the enemy. Instead, the humans were charging straight at their opponents like ancient cavalry. The first exchange of fire lit up space like a new star. Devourer energy beams, powerful enough to crack a moon, struck the human ships. But instead of the quick destruction they expected, the humans kept coming. Their armor was crude but thick. Their shields were simple but strong. Most importantly, they did not retreat when they took damage. The battleship Constitution took a direct hit that would have destroyed any ship in the Galactic Fleet. Instead of withdrawing, Captain Lisa Rodriguez ordered all power to weapons and rammed her crippled ship directly into a Devourer harvester. The explosion took out 3 enemy vessels. "What are they doing?" gasped the sensor officer on Harmony of Stars. "That ship was still functional. They could have retreated and repaired." Commander Zephyros understood, even if his crew did not. "They are not fighting to preserve their ships," he said quietly. "They are fighting to save the people on that planet." The battle raged across the Haven's rest system. Human ships threw themselves at the Devourers with a ferocity that confused the ancient machine intelligence. The Devourers calculated that opponents would retreat when faced with certain destruction. Their algorithms predicted surrender when Casualties reached critical levels, but the humans did not calculate like that. Lieutenant Ben Torres led a boarding party onto a Devourer ship, knowing it was almost certainly a suicide mission. His team of 50 Marines fought their way through mechanical corridors filled with deadly traps and automated defenses. When they reached the ship's control center, only 8 humans were still alive. "Torres to Liberty," he radioed, his voice calm despite the hopeless situation. "We have control of the Harvester's navigation system. Recommend you clear the area." Admiral Sullivan understood immediately. "Torres, there has to be another way." "Negative, Admiral. These machines took kids from that planet. They do not get to leave." Without waiting for permission, Torres set the Harvester on a collision course with the Devourer command ship. The explosion lit up half the system. On the planet's surface, Sergeant Maria Rodriguez held a defensive position with her company of ground troops. They had been ordered to protect an evacuation point where thousands of alien civilians were waiting for transport. The area was supposed to be secure, but Devourer ground units had broken through the perimeter. The mechanical killers advanced like a tide of death. Each Devourer unit was the size of a tank, armed with weapons that could level buildings. Maria's company had basic human equipment: rifles, grenades, and determination. "Sergeant, we should fall back to the secondary position," suggested Corporal Danny Hayes over the radio. "We are outnumbered 10-1. Maria looked behind her at the evacuation point. Alien families huddled together in fear, children who reminded her of her own daughter back on Earth, even though they had blue skin and too many eyes. Parents trying to comfort kids who did not understand why metal monsters wanted to hurt them. "Negative, Corporal," she replied, checking her weapon. "These people are counting on us. We hold this line." For 6 hours, Maria's company fought against impossible odds. They used every trick humans had learned in centuries of warfare. They turned buildings into fortresses, streets into kill zones, and every piece of cover into a fighting position. When they ran out of ammunition, they used explosives. When they ran out of explosives, they used their bare hands. By the time reinforcements arrived, only 12 of Maria's soldiers were still alive. But the evacuation point was secure. Every single civilian had been saved. The space battle reached its climax when the Devourer mothership, a mechanical monster the size of a small moon, began moving toward the planet. Its harvesting beams could strip all life from the surface in minutes. "All ships concentrate fire on the mothership," ordered Admiral Sullivan. But even as she gave the command, she knew their weapons could not penetrate its armor. That was when Engineer Pete Wilson made a decision that changed everything. His ship, the destroyer Courage, had taken massive damage and was already dead in space, but its reactor was still functional. "Admiral, this is Wilson on the Courage," he radioed. "I have an idea, but you are not going to like it." Before Admiral Sullivan could respond, Wilson activated the ship's emergency systems and aimed directly at the mothership. The Courage, traveling at nearly the speed of light, struck the massive Devourer vessel like a bullet hitting glass. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. When the light faded, the Devourer mothership was gone. The remaining enemy ships, suddenly cut off from their command network, began to retreat. The ancient machines, for the first time in their existence, were confused. Their enemy had not fought logically. They had not tried to preserve their forces or minimize casualties. They had simply refused to lose. Commander Zephyros stood on his bridge, staring at the tactical display in wonder. The humans had lost over half their fleet. By any measure, it should have been considered a terrible defeat. But they had saved Haven's Rest. 12 million lives continued because humans had been willing to die for strangers. "Commander," said his communications officer, "we are receiving a message from the human admiral. 3 months after the battle at Haven's Rest, the war had spread across 7 star systems. The combined human and alien fleet moved from world to world, always one step ahead of the main Devourer force, buying time for massive evacuations that saved millions of lives." Captain Joe Parker stood on the bridge of the human cruiser Determination, watching as the last evacuation ships lifted off from the industrial world of Kepler Prime. Below them, 40 million refugees from a dozen different species were packed into cargo holds and passenger compartments, heading for safety in the inner systems. "Sir, long-range sensors are picking up the Devourer fleet," reported Lieutenant Sandra Bell from her position at the tactical station. "They will be here in 18 hours. Captain Parker nodded grimly. 18 hours was barely enough time to complete the evacuation, but it would have to do. The pattern was always the same. The Devourers would arrive with overwhelming force, expecting quick victory. The human and alien defenders would fight a desperate delaying action, holding the line just long enough for civilians to escape. It was a strategy that saved lives, but it was slowly killing the fleet. Every battle cost them ships they could not replace. Every victory came at a price measured in brave people who would never go home. "Captain," called out Communications Officer Danny Wright, "we are receiving a priority message from General Brooks on the planet's surface." The main screen flickered to life, showing the face of General Amanda Brooks. She was covered in dust and looked like she had not slept in days. Behind her, human and alien soldiers worked together to coordinate the evacuation of a refugee processing center. "Joe, we have a problem," she said without preamble. "The civilian transport Galaxy Hope broke down in the outer system. They are carrying 15,000 refugees, mostly children and elderly. Their engines are dead and they cannot reach the hyperspace jump point." Captain Parker felt his stomach drop. The Galaxy Hope was an old civilian freighter, pressed into service because they needed every ship they could find. If it was stranded in the outer system when the Devourers arrived, everyone aboard would die. "What about the escort ships?" he asked. "The corvette Swift Arrow is standing by, but she does not have the power to tow a ship that size," General Brooks replied. "We need something bigger." Captain Parker looked at his tactical display. The only ships in the system with enough power to move the Galaxy Hope were the heavy warships. But if they left their defensive positions, the evacuation fleet would be vulnerable to attack. It was exactly the kind of impossible choice that humans had been making throughout this war. "General, signal the Galaxy Hope that help is on the way," Captain Parker said. "Determination is moving to assist." Lieutenant Bell looked up from her station in surprise. "Sir, if we leave the defensive perimeter, the Devourer advanced scouts could attack the main evacuation fleet." "Then we better make sure we get back in time," Captain Parker replied calmly. This was what the alien still did not understand about human military thinking. When faced with a choice between tactical advantage and saving innocent lives, humans chose to save lives. Every single time. The determination broke formation and raced toward the outer system at maximum speed. Behind them, the other human ships adjusted their positions to cover the gap. It was a risky move that no military academy would have taught, but it was the human way. Meanwhile, on the surface of Kepler Prime, Major Chris Taylor was dealing with his own impossible situation. His battalion of human Marines was responsible for protecting the main spaceport while the last refugee ships were loaded. Intelligence reports suggested that Devourer ground forces would not arrive for several hours, but intelligence had been wrong before. Major Taylor walked among his troops, checking their positions and equipment. These were good soldiers, veterans of the war who had seen things that would give most people nightmares. But they kept fighting because they knew what happened to civilians when the Devourers arrived. "Major," called out Sergeant Dana Mitchell, pointing toward the horizon, "we have movement out there." Through his binoculars, Major Taylor could see them, Devourer ground units, moving across the landscape like a tide of mechanical death. They were still several miles away, but they were coming fast. "How long until the last transport lifts off?" he asked into his radio. 2 hours, sir," came the reply from the spaceport control tower. "We are loading as fast as we can, but there are still thousands of civilians waiting." Major Taylor looked at his battalion. 800 human soldiers against an enemy force that numbered in the thousands. The smart tactical move would be to fall back to the inner defensive line, trading space for time. But that would mean abandoning the civilians at the spaceport. "All units, this is Major Taylor," he said over the radio. "We hold this line. No matter what happens, we hold this line." The battle for Kepler Prime began at dawn. Devourer units advanced in perfect formation, their weapons cutting through buildings like they were made of cardboard. But the humans had prepared for this. They had turned every street into a maze of obstacles, every building into a fortress, every piece of cover into a fighting position. Sergeant Mitchell led her squad in a series of hit-and-run attacks that confused the Devourer. Targeting systems. The machines were programmed to fight predictable enemies who used standard tactics, but humans did not fight standard battles. When the enemy tried to advance down the main road, they found it blocked by overturned vehicles and debris. When they tried to go around, they walked into carefully prepared ambushes. When they tried to use their superior firepower to blast through obstacles, they discovered that the humans had rigged the entire area with explosives. Private Johnny Coleman, barely 19 years old and fresh from basic training, held a defensive position for 3 hours against odds that should have killed him in minutes. When his ammunition ran out, he used improvised weapons. When those broke, he used rocks and debris. He was still fighting when reinforcements finally arrived. In space, Captain Parker and the crew of the Determination had their own battle to fight. The Galaxy Hope was dead in space, surrounded by smaller Devourer ships that had arrived ahead of the main fleet. The civilian transport was defenseless, packed with refugees who could do nothing but wait and hope. All weapons, target the lead Devourer ships, Captain Parker ordered. We go in fast and hit them hard. The Determination charged into the enemy formation like an ancient knight riding into battle. Her weapons blazed as she engaged 3 Devourer vessels at once, using her superior speed and maneuverability to avoid their return fire. But the human ship was outnumbered and outgunned. Warning lights flashed on the bridge as systems took damage. The hull groaned under the stress of multiple impacts. "Sir, we are taking heavy damage," reported Chief Engineer Bobby Adams over the intercom. "I do not know how much more we can take." "Captain," Parker looked at the tactical display. The Galaxy Hope was so close, just a few more minutes and they could attach towing cables. But the Devourer ships were closing in from all sides. "Engineering, give me everything you have got," he said. "Weapons, target their engines. If we can slow them down, we might have a chance." The battle raged around the helpless civilian ship. The Determination fought like a wounded animal, striking at enemies from unexpected angles using every trick human pilots had learned in centuries of warfare. When her main guns were damaged, she used missile tubes. When those ran out, she rammed, damaged Devourer ships with her armored hull. Finally, after what seemed like hours, the towing cables connected. The Galaxy Hope with its precious cargo of refugees began moving toward the hyperspace jump point. But the Determination was badly damaged and falling behind. "Captain," said Lieutenant Bell quietly, "the Devourer main fleet is entering the system. If we do not jump to hyperspace in the next 5 minutes, we will not escape." Captain Parker looked at his ship's status reports. The Determination could make the jump, but barely. The Galaxy Hope, heavy with refugees and moving slowly, needed more time. "Signal the Galaxy Hope," he said. "Tell them to go ahead and jump. We will follow when we can." Everyone on the bridge understood what that meant. They were staying behind, to buy time for the civilian ship to escape. It was probably a suicide mission, but it was also the only way to save 15,000 innocent lives. The Galaxy Hope disappeared into hyperspace just as the first Devourer battleships arrived. The Determination, alone and heavily damaged, turned to face the enemy fleet. But before the final battle could begin, something unexpected happened. The rest of the human fleet arrived, led by Admiral Sullivan on the Liberty. They had completed the evacuation of Kepler Prime ahead of schedule and come to help their fellow humans. "This is Admiral Sullivan to all ships," came the voice over the radio. "No one gets left behind." The human fleet formed a protective formation around the damaged Determination and began fighting their way out of the system. It was a running battle that lasted for hours, with ships covering each other as they leapfrogged toward the hyperspace jump point. When they finally escaped, the cost was clear. 3 human ships had been destroyed. Hundreds of good people were dead. The Determination was so badly damaged that she would need months of repairs. 6 months after first contact, the war came home to Earth. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the command center of Luna Base, watching the tactical display with growing dread. The massive Devourer fleet hung at the edge of the solar system like a dark cloud of death. After months of defeats across the galaxy, The ancient machines had finally traced the source of their frustration to humanity's home system. "Fleet status report," she ordered. Commander Jake Morrison, now her second-in-command, consulted his datapad. "We have assembled everything we could find, Admiral. 412 ships from Earth Defense Force plus 68 alien vessels that survived the retreat from Proxima Centauri." Admiral Sullivan nodded grimly. It was less than half the fleet they had started with. The war had cost them dearly. Good ships, good people. Entire crews who had given everything to protect strangers across the galaxy. "The enemy fleet?" she asked. "Over 800 ships," Morrison replied quietly, "including 3 motherships and the new command vessel they built from destroyed planets." The numbers were terrible, but Admiral Sullivan had expected this. The Devourers had learned from every battle, adapting their tactics and building new weapons designed specifically to fight humans. They had studied human psychology, human tactics, human technology. This time, they were prepared. "Sir." "Incoming. Transmission from the Devourer command ship," reported Communications Officer Lisa Parker. "Put it through." The main screen flickered to life, showing something that barely looked alive. The Devourer intelligence was a mixture of machine and stolen organic matter, a twisted fusion of technology, and the essence of destroyed civilizations. "Humans of Earth," it spoke with the voices of 1,000 dead species. "You have caused significant disruption to our expansion. We offer terms. Surrender your fleet and submit to harvesting. In return, we will consume your species quickly, without unnecessary suffering." Admiral Sullivan looked at the thing on the screen with disgust. "Counteroffer," she said calmly. "Go back to whatever dark corner of space you came from and never return. We will only destroy you once." The Devourer intelligence tilted its mechanical head. "You speak of destruction, yet you are outnumbered 2 to 1. Your tactics have been analyzed. Your weapons have been categorized. Your psychological patterns have been mapped. You cannot surprise us again." "We will see about that," Admiral Sullivan replied, and cut the transmission. She turned to address her staff. "Gentlemen, ladies, today we fight the most important battle in human history, not just for Earth, but for every innocent life in this galaxy. The enemy thinks they understand us. Let us prove them wrong. The plan was insane by any measure of military logic. Instead of defending Earth's orbital platforms, the human fleet would advance directly into the heart of the Devourer formation. Instead of trying to preserve their forces, they would commit everything to a single decisive assault. Fleet Admiral Tony Clark, commanding the heavy battleships, shook his head as he read the orders. "Kate, this is suicide. We are throwing away every advantage we have." "Tony, we never had any advantages except our willingness to do the impossible," Admiral Sullivan replied over the communication link. "Today we do it one more time. The battle began at dawn, Earth time. The human fleet moved forward in 3 waves, each one designed to punch through a different section of the Devourer line. The alien ships that had fought alongside them for months followed, inspired by human courage even in the face of certain defeat. Captain Laura White, commanding the assault cruiser Valiant, led the first wave directly at the largest Devourer, mothership. Her orders were simple: create a gap in their defensive formation that the second wave could exploit. "All ships, this is White," she broadcast on the fleet frequency. "Remember what we are fighting for. Remember who we are protecting. Today we show the galaxy what humans do when our backs are against the wall." The first exchange of fire lit up the entire solar system. Devourer weapons, more powerful than anything they had used before, struck the human ships with devastating force. The destroyer Courage was vaporized in the first seconds. The cruiser Defiance broke apart under concentrated fire from 6 enemy vessels, but the humans kept coming. The Valiant, her armor glowing red-hot from multiple hits, rammed directly into the side of the mothership. Captain White, knowing her ship was doomed, activated the self-destruct sequence. The explosion tore a hole in the enemy formation large enough for the second wave to exploit. Commander Sam Rodriguez, leading a squadron of engineering ships, saw his chance. These were not warships, but converted civilian vessels, equipped with the most dangerous weapon humanity had ever created. A gravity bomb built using stolen alien technology and human ingenuity. "This is Rodriguez to all units," he broadcast as his ships raced toward the Devourer command vessel. "We are going in. If we do not make it back, tell them we tried to save everyone." The engineering ships were slow and lightly armed, easy targets for the Devourer point defense systems. One by one, they were picked off by enemy fire. But Rodriguez and 2 other ships made it through, flying directly into the launch bay of the command vessel. The gravity bomb detonated inside the Devourer ship, creating a small black hole that consumed the ancient intelligence and half the enemy fleet before collapsing. Suddenly, the mechanical precision of the Devourer attack began to falter, as individual ships lost contact with their central command. But the battle was far from over. The remaining Devourer ships, now operating independently, began a desperate assault on Earth itself. Dozens of mechanical killers broke through the defensive line and headed for the planet's surface. On Luna, Vice Admiral Greg Thompson made the hardest decision of his military career. The flagship Terra Nova was the most powerful ship in the human fleet, equipped with enough firepower to level a continent. But it was also the only vessel large enough to carry the weapon that could end this war forever. "All hands, this is the Admiral," he announced over the ship's intercom. "We are going to ram the remaining Devourer mothership. Prepare for impact." The Terra Nova, her engines pushed beyond their safety limits, accelerated toward the enemy vessel. Devourer weapons struck her again and again, but the massive human battleship kept coming. When she finally struck the mothership, the explosion was visible from Mars. But even as the main Devourer fleet died in the vacuum of space, the real battle was just beginning on Earth's surface. Hundreds of Devourer ground units had landed across the planet, beginning the process of harvesting organic matter to fuel their war machine. In New York, Sergeant Julie Foster led a desperate defense of the evacuation centers. In London, Captain Alex Turner coordinated resistance efforts from the ruins of Parliament. In Tokyo, Major Katie Adams held the spaceport long enough for the last civilian transports to escape. But it was in the wheat fields of Kansas where the war's final chapter was written. Private Danny Miller, a farm boy who had joined the military to see the galaxy, found himself face to face with a Devourer harvester the size of a building. His squad was dead, his radio was broken, his rifle was empty, but between him and the machine was a school full of children who had not been evacuated in time. Danny looked at the improvised explosive device in his hands, something he had built from spare parts and farming chemicals. It was not much, but it was all he had. "You want to harvest something?" he said to the mechanical monster. "Harvest this." The explosion took out the harvester and created a crater that could be seen from orbit. More importantly, it bought enough time for the school to be evacuated. Similar scenes played out across Earth as ordinary humans made extraordinary sacrifices. Teachers who stayed behind to protect their students. Doctors who refused to abandon their patients. Police officers who held the line against impossible odds. When the sun set on that terrible day, Earth was scarred but still free. The Devourer. Threat was finally ended, their ancient intelligence destroyed, their fleet scattered to the winds, but the cost had been enormous. 5 years later, Ambassador Rachel Morrison stood before the new Galactic Council in the great assembly hall that had been built on Luna. She was Jake Morrison's daughter, representing Earth in the reformed galactic government that now included humanity as a founding member. "Honored representatives," she began, addressing beings from hundreds of worlds that were now free because humans had been willing to die for them. "We gather today to remember those who gave everything so that we could be here." On the wall behind her was a simple monument, a black surface covered with names written in every language of the galaxy. Human names like Danny Miller and Julie Foster. Alien names like Zephyros and Kale Thera. Beings who had learned to fight and die together for something greater than themselves. The inscription at the bottom was written in the common galactic script, but the words were pure human. "Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down their life for their friends." Commander Zephyros, now an old being but still serving as Minister of Defense, stood to address the assembly. 5 years ago, my species and many others faced extinction. We called for help from beings we considered primitive, violent, unpredictable. He looked around the hall at representatives from dozens of species, all of them free because humanity had answered their call.